Here's a 69 Deluxe Reverb that just came in, and I'm going to go through and check all the things I normally check. Now, I know this amp has had service in the past. It's got a 3-conductor power cable here. Looks heavy duty. Hopefully it was installed right. Looks to be in real good shape. If I need to redo the connections, there's plenty of length to make the adjustments. Let's look here beneath the doghouse. All right, got some F&T 16s. We move the 4 screws that took off of the doghouse cover into the doghouse cover and set to the side. So we've got some 10K droppers here. Looks to be 3-watt metal oxides, no problem there. F&Ts, fairly well installed, not the neatest, but safe, and secured to the board with some silicone. They've got a 470K, looks to be a 2-watt carbon film here across the reservoir stage. That's a bleeder so that as the amp sits not powered on, it doesn't store voltage as long as the standby is left in play. Otherwise, you'll have all the voltage drained from the reservoir stage, and the other stages will stay charged up for a good while. So if you're interested in using a bleeder resistor like this, make sure you leave the amp in play, not standby, for this to have the benefit for the entire power section. Before I did this, I did verify that there was no voltage here waiting to zap me. So, important step. Let's make sure that the transformers are all tight. They are all dated 1969. So all the hardware is tight for these 3 transformers. We'll check the hardware on this one when we flip the chassis over. One of the next things I like to check are the tightness of the hardware on the input jacks. If these are loose, I know that a lot of things will be loose. If these are tight, it gives me hope that everything else has been maintained well. Little bit further tightened. Not much. They're pretty good, but I like to make sure that they're really rock solid. I'll check all the pots after a while. And when I make those final tightening to the adjustments to the input jacks, I always verify that there's no break in the solder joint on the other side, because sometimes they can rotate a little bit and strain that solder joint. It's fairly common. Looking in here, I'm seeing all the 1969 wire that I expect, and I see some shielded runs, and I'm seeing some stuff that definitely does need to get changed. All right, they've got a splice here. This is not one of the things that has to be changed, but they're splicing the primary to the neutral. Actually, this little yellow wire going to here. That works, but since we're just tying into here, since the old ground lift switch is long gone, I'm going to see if I think I've got enough length. If I untwist this primary going to the power switch, I can probably bring it directly here and just have the neutral go straight to the primary and not have this little spliced in yellow wire as an intermediary. And over here, the safety ground on the AC cable is being made to transformer hardware, and I'll move that to the chassis like they were done in the pre-65 amps. Over here on the octals, they have the original screen grid resistors. I like to change those out. They've got seemingly non-original snubber caps from the grid to ground. I'll be removing those. They may be original, just in fantastic shape. Usually these get dark and discolored because they have a bit of wax on them that absorb dirt. Either way, these can go away and make this thing sound more like the pre-68 versions. And they've got these tiny little 1/4-watt resistors from cathode to ground for measuring bias current. Those are not reliable. You really want those to be 1 watt or 2 watt. They're not there to be fuses. They're there to just measure bias if you need to. And I don't like the look of those. 1/4 watt is too little. 1/4 watt I would not trust for gigging. Anyway, we're going to get in here and put a wire from the chassis to cathode. We're going to replace these screen grid resistors. We're going to make sure that the grid stoppers from pins 1 to pins 5 are in good shape, measuring 1.5K to 1.8K is a typical drift range that's acceptable. Make sure they're the same on both sides. And we're going to get rid of these snubber caps, because the only reason Fender put those snubber caps in was to keep the amps from having oscillation. And the reason the amp started having oscillations is because the standards for lead dress went way downhill, late 67, 68. And by 69, they were really bad. It looks worse in the post-69 amps, which use the really thick white plastic wire. But this is not good lead dress in comparison to, say, a 64 example. And so when you have all this excess wire very sloppily run with no care for lead dress, you can get oscillations in the amp. It was cheaper for Fender just to add some caps at the output to prevent the oscillation than to train their workers to do it right, or to accept that doing it right would take longer so they may be able to make fewer amps per day. This is pretty typical of what you see in 69. This 250 picofarad treble cap just way up in the air as opposed to down against the board. Like I said, they were really trying to get things out the door really fast. And while this is functional, it's not that great to have something up there that can go brown. You know, I exaggerate a little bit, but vibration is really a thing. And the less mass you have suspended up in the air and the shorter the leads, the less it'll be prone to vibrating and moving around. That's just physics. Let's straighten that up while we're at it. And we'll see what we can do about neatening up the heater wiring and get it consistently away from the grids as we go. That's not a big deal. Sketty everywhere. All this stuff needs to be neatened up. I'll talk to the owner. I don't want to spend his money for him and just volunteer him to have a big bill. But just getting all this stuff neatened up and tightly twisted the way they used to do it really does pay off in dividends in terms of reliability and low noise, and making sure that the signals going to and from the reverb channel are not here right next to the signals in the normal channel. Like that bundle of wire right there does not need to be right there. Little things like that. The only electrolytic in the amp I see that really needs to be replaced is this 25 here. Now that's what's on the schematic, and they did in fact make them from the factory very early with 25, but a lot of them had 4.7, actually 5 microfarads, which gives you a much better response rate with the speed pot. Not in terms of what the tremolo sounds like, the vibrato sounds like, but when you turn the speed up, it actually turns up as opposed to just stopping for a second and then catching up with you, which is what you get with the 25, because it takes a while for that to discharge and recharge, whereas the 5 microfarad responds in a more realistic time manner. We'll make sure the tremolo is sounding good. These LDRs often go bad, and these caps in the LFO often drift and become really weak as far as passing the signal. But overall, this amp's looking pretty good. It's a very clean board as far as these things go. Over here on the bias pot, there's an added resistor in parallel with these two lugs. That's kind of changed the taper and the range of the bias. Not in ways that I've ever seen necessary in a Deluxe reverb. I'll be taking that out and verifying the bias is set correctly. If I need to change the limiting resistor here to get the range of the pot where I want it, I'll be glad to. But this is kind of a hodgepodge, wrong solution to a problem that may or may not exist. Aside from the mystery white haze that's on this black F&T cap here, 100, the bias stuff looks fine. It does have the original resistor, which I'll measure, and has the original diode. I'll be changing that out. There's nothing intrinsically valuable about these cheap diodes from 1969. There's no impact on the tone when they're working, but when they fail, and they can fail after 60 years, bad things happen, and a new high-quality 1 in 4007 is cheap, cheap, cheap. I've got a couple of hundred of them. Down here, I think I see some discoloration on this resistor here. It may just be a shadow. I'll find out after I move the camera out of my way and get closer in. I'll pop up on the screen if it's discolored or if it's just a shadow. But these are the heater balance resistors, artificial center tap from either side of the lamp, and they're going to that ground lug there for the bias supply. I'm going to take out that ground lug and solder the wire from the bias cap positive straight to chassis. And I'll redo these resistors, whether this one's discolored or not. I'm going to redo these resistors. I like to take them not to the chassis because it makes it really hard for the next tech to replace them. I bring them over here to this solder joint, which is electrically the same, has no downside to going here, and is much easier to work in the future. So it turns out if one of these needs to be repaired, it takes 10 minutes, not 30 minutes. Just a matter of having to heat up a chassis iron for the job, or just a regular soldering iron for the job. And it takes my chassis iron about 15 minutes to get hot enough. So, and all these grounds here that are made to the chassis and to the mounting hardware are going to be redone just to chassis, because I have found that when you have the transformer mounting hardware involved, it breaks the solder joint off of the chassis. But at least it's better than only trusting the bolt by itself and not trusting a little bit of chassis solder. Anyway, you've seen all that before. It's pretty easy to get it right. I'll get it right. Did I speak too soon about it being really clean? The camera was blocking my view of this area here where this white substance. I'll clean all that up. That's probably due to some kind of reaction, maybe to this screw. I've not seen that before. Let's just give it a squirt and see how much of that comes up right here before we get started on anything else. Pretty high-tech stuff. You gotta have all the fancy tools. It's looking like that'll clean up no problem. I'll get the rest of it when the camera's out of my way. While that ISO evaporates, let me check this tightness of the speaker jacks. Again, they were tight, but now they're tighter. I'll actually remove these jacks, clean all this contact surfaces, clean the tooth washer, and make sure that they're really tight. And it's got an old fuse in here. Let's see what, it's a 2 amp, so that's correct. Seems to be in pretty good shape. Let me take a measurement on it real quick. Just because sometimes those old ones look okay. This one's fine. Sometimes they look okay, but they're not. And while I've got the meter handy, let's take some measurements in this area. So the screen grid is supposed to be 470 ohms. 489.6. 495.4. Grid stoppers. 1.456. Huh. Sometimes on these old solder joints is just tarnish and stuff. 1.509. Let's see on these cathode resistors. 11, 12. 13. I assume the started off life is 10 ohms as opposed to 1 ohm. Not the way to do it. Anyway, I'm not seeing anything in the amp that would cause this amp to have problems. Let me measure in the bias supply just in case. So this 470 ohm measures 488.9, and let me change over to measure the diode. 0.6. And 2.9. Okay. That is a leaky diode. It's that diode there in the bias supply. It's not supposed to have any voltage in one direction, and it sure did. So let me change that out before we do anything else. All better. Now we can safely power this on with the tubes. I have all the owner's provided tubes, which are a mismatch of various, looks to be 70s and maybe 80s, mostly new old stock preamp tubes. 2 visibly different era 6v6s from GE, but the owner said they're matched. I will not, however, be trying this JJ504GB rectifier, because I don't know if you can see that. It's got flecks of stuff inside it, and those flecks of stuff used to be on the metal plates of the rectifier tube. That tube is on its way out. That might be the source of the noise he's been experiencing. So I'm going to bring it up on my current limiter using this 504GB RCA from that 78 Super Reverb I've got in for service as a test. I don't know that this rectifier is any good either, but it doesn't have any visible issues. But I've got it all hooked up. It's going to my cab. I don't have the real mic set up on the cab today. If it sounds great, I'll set that up and let you guys hear it. If it has issues, you'll hear it through the bench mic here. So we're going to power it on. And there's no big current draw. You can see that light bulb back in the back there. The lamp is coming on. I don't usually use the standby switch when using a Deluxe reverb. It's not necessary with a 5U4 or a 5AR4, which is also called a GZ34 rectifier tube. But when first powering up an amp, I do like to use the standby switch because if there's a problem and it's not it's in standby, I know where in the circuit that problem is. If the problem is only there after standby, that helps me narrow it down. So let's bring it out of standby. Keep an eye on that bulb over there. Well, there's no earth-shattering kaboom. There's supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom. Let's bring the volumes up. Bit noisy. That's the lack of shielding, though. On the normal channel, little crackle on that pot, probably just isn't using that channel very often. That'll clean up just through repetition, I bet. Anyway, I'm going to hook up a guitar and see how the reverb and tone stack is sounding and all that, and just get a general sense of it. All right, let's test the money-making channel first, the reverb channel. This is that K-Line Springfield. Got a little bit of a throb it shouldn't have. Did you guys hear that? How when I turned it up the speed knob real fast, the trim cut out for a second and then caught back up? That's that cap I was talking about. And if you listen closely, you can hear some thumping and thudding. That's that lead dress. I said this thing is chock full of spaghetti. When I'm done, there won't be any spaghetti and there won't be any thudding. And there's ticking and thudding even with the intensity off. I'm going to take off the LFO, turn off the LFO for a while and spare us from that noise. Someone has already removed the bright cap. Good for them. I'm glad to hear it. Let's go to the normal channel. Pot's a little dirty. If it doesn't clean up just from turning it, I'll do some stuff. So I'll clean it properly. So I'm thinking the problems the owner reporting were probably the bad diode in the bias supply, which is pretty crucial, and that JJ 5U4GB that's definitely got some internal damage. Now, that's not a reflection on JJ. JJ makes fine rectifier tubes overall, but all tubes can fail, and that one its time has come. So that's a pretty good bill of health report. I'll talk to the owner after he sees this video and see if there's anything else we need to do. Until then, thanks for watching.